Hello, viewers, and welcome to Hidden Korea. Tonight, we dive into a story so unexpected, so emotionally charged. It has shaken an entire stage to silence. Get ready, because we're about to uncover a moment where truth collided with trembling courage. Yang Mei Mei, her voice shaking and her eyes filled with tears, revealed, "I'm carrying Yulong's child, for the second time." A revelation that stunned fans, froze the spotlight, and set the entire audience ablaze with speculation. Stay with us, let's uncover the full story, right now. The auditorium was supposed to erupt with applause. The lights were supposed to shimmer with excitement, marking another triumphant night in Yang Mei Mei's rising career. But what unfolded beneath those blinding stage lamps was something no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted. From the moment she stepped onto the platform, wrapped in a soft white gown that shimmered delicately against the spotlight, something felt wrong. Her smile was fragile, trembling at the corners, as if she was holding back a storm just waiting to break. The audience sensed it immediately. A hush crept across the hall. Phones that should have been filming with excitement were instead raised in confusion, capturing a moment that felt dangerously close to unraveling. Yang Mei Mei clutched the microphone with both hands, her knuckles widening as if she were bracing herself against an invisible force. Her breath shook, her shoulders quivered, and then, her voice cracked. Before she even spoke, her eyes filled with tears. Not the graceful, camera-ready tears of an actress, but raw, chaotic, uncontrollable tremors that made the entire room stiffen with anxiety. She inhaled shakily, trying to hold herself together. Body betrayed her. A faint sob slipped out, going through the silent hall like a whispered confession. And then came the words so shocking that they sliced through the air like a blade. "I'm carrying Yulong's child," she said, voice trembling, barely holding together. For the second time, the hall exploded. Gasps erupted like fireworks. Some fans screamed, others froze in disbelief, their faces draining of color as the microphone slipped in her hands. Even the staff backstage stood paralyzed, unsure whether to rush to her aid or let the moment unfold. It was as if everyone had just witnessed a bomb detonate, not with fire, but with truth. But this revelation wasn't born on that stage. It had been brewing, pulsing beneath the surface, long before she gathered the courage to drag it into the light. The day before the performance, Yang Mei Mei had already been a mess, her eyes swollen, her steps unsteady, her voice cracking whenever she tried to rehearse. Rumors circulated among her team. She had argued with someone on the phone. She had locked herself in her dressing room for hours. She had thrown away a bouquet sent anonymously with a note that simply read, "We need to talk." She avoided all questions. She avoided everyone. She even canceled sound checks, something she never did. The tension around her built like a tightening coil. But no one expected it to snap in such a catastrophic way. And then there was Yulong, the man whose name had the power to shake industries, whose influence rippled across entertainment, business, and politics alike. A single headline with his name could dominate every platform. And now his name was intertwined with a scandal that would bury every other story alive. The truth was, Yulong had been in the shadows for months. No public appearances, no statements, no interviews. People whispered endlessly, was he hiding something? Was he involved in another controversy? But never, not even for a second, did anyone suspect that Yang Mei Mei was carrying his secret. And certainly not that this was the second time. She stood trembling on stage. Memories of the first pregnancy flickered through her mind like shards of broken glass. Quiet hospital room. The hurried signatures. Unspoken promises. The decision that had haunted her in silence. She had buried it deep, hoping it would never surface again. But life has a cruel way of dragging the past into the present, and tonight, it came crashing back with brutal force. Knees buckled slightly, and the audience watched in horror as she struggled to stay upright. Stage staff rushed forward, but she raised a hand, signaling them to stop. She needed, to finish her confession. Voice trembled again, each word weighing heavily with pain. "I can't hide it anymore. I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't carry this alone." The lights above her flickered as if reacting to the magnitude of her words. The crowd leaned forward collectively, trapped between shock and sympathy, waiting, desperate, to hear what came next. But before she could continue, A security guard whispered urgently into the ear of a stage manager, who immediately turned pale. Something was happening outside the venue, something involving Yulong's private security detail. Word spread backstage like wildfire. Journalists waiting outside suddenly rushed toward the entrance. Fans began shouting. Atmosphere turned electric, unstable. Everything was on the verge of spiraling out of control. And there, under the blinding lights, Mei Mei closed her eyes, her tears falling freely, not from shame, but from the overwhelming weight of a truth that had finally burst free. The storm had only just begun. Chaos swelled outside the venue like a rising tide. A muffled roar of reporters, the flash of cameras, the sudden surge of security, all of it blended into a storm that pressed fiercely against the walls of the auditorium. The crowd inside felt it. They sensed that something enormous was unfolding beyond the stage. Something that had been set in motion the moment Yang Mei Mei revealed her truth. But on stage, she stood frozen in the spotlight, breathing unevenly as the magnitude of her confession wrapped around her like a tightening cloak. Her heart pounded against her ribs. World spinning in fragments. Somewhere in the distance, someone called her name. But the sound was swallowed by a wave of murmurs spreading through the audience like wildfire. Then the doors burst open. A commotion rippled through the hall as several men in dark suits pushed their way inside. Their presence was unmistakable, Yulong's personal security team. They moved with urgency, scanning the room with razor-sharp focus. The crowd gasped, shrinking back as fear and anticipation surged in equal measure. The room no longer felt like a performance venue, it felt like the epicenter of a scandal detonating in real time. Yang Mei Mei's gaze flickered toward them, catching in her throat. She knew this moment would come, she had felt it haunting her for days, following her like a shadow she couldn't shake off. But seeing them here, storming into the hall, everything suddenly real. Too real. One of the guards spoke rapidly into an earpiece. Stage manager approached him, trembling. Their whispered conversation was barely audible, but the single name that emerged cut through the space like a blade. Yulong. The audience erupted again, voices clashing in disbelief. Was he here? Was he coming? Was he about to face the truth she had unleashed? Fans stood on their seats, craning their necks. The entire hall pulsed with raw, breathless tension, as though the very air had ignited. Backstage, a flurry of staff scrambled to shut down the confusion. But it was too late. The storm outside had broken through. Now it swept into the heart of the room with unstoppable force. The heavy doors at the back of the auditorium swung open once more, this time slowly, deliberately, as if the world itself were holding its breath. A tall silhouette appeared in the entryway. Yulong. His presence alone altered the atmosphere. The entire crowd into a profound, disbelieving silence. He stepped forward, his expression carved in stone. His eyes trained straight ahead, not at the audience, not at the security team, but at Yang Mei Mei. Every step he took echoed through the hall, steady and unignorable, like the footsteps of fate itself moving toward its reckoning. Yang Mei Mei's breath shattered. Her fingers tightened around the microphone, knees trembling. She had imagined this moment countless times in sleepless nights, but nothing could have prepared her for the intensity of seeing him walk toward her under the blinding lights, in front of thousands, with the world watching. He ascended the stage slowly, each step a battle between pride and responsibility. When he finally reached her, he stopped just inches away. The room was so silent it felt suffocating. "Mei Mei," he whispered, only loud enough for the microphone to catch, sending tremors through the hall. Her tears spilled over again. She didn't step back. She didn't hide. She looked directly at him, eyes glistening, fragile yet burning with the fierce bravery that had brought her this far. "You knew this would come out eventually," she said, voice quivering but resolute. Yulong's jaw tightened. The audience leaned forward, breathless. His hands were trembling, not from anger, from a truth he could no longer bury. He glanced toward the sea of phones, cameras, and stunned faces staring back at him, then returned his gaze to her. "I wanted to protect you," he said. "I thought keeping it quiet, keeping the first time quiet, would spare you." The hall shook with gasps. First time, he admitted it. Every rumor, every secret whispered behind closed doors now stood exposed under the merciless glow of the spotlight. Mei Mei's shoulders trembled as she spoke, voice thick with emotion. Protect me? Or protect yourself? Long looked as if the word sliced him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The first time, the man who commanded industries with a single sentence stood speechless. Horrible. Cornered. Then Mei Mei pressed a hand to her stomach. The gesture froze the entire room. You don't get to run from this anymore, she said softly, but with a strength that resonated through every corner of the hall. I won't let this child grow up in shadows. Yu Long's face cracked, pain, regret, realization all merging into one expression that no one in the crowd had ever seen from him. He took a shaky breath, stepping closer. Run, he finally said. Not anymore. The hall trembled, not physically, but emotionally, as if thousands of hearts clenched at once. Reporters pushed closer. Fans cried. Some shouted in anger, others in support. The room was no longer a stage but a battleground of truth, consequence, and raw human emotion. Mei Mei's tears finally softened. She lowered the microphone, her body weakening from the emotional weight she had just unleashed. Yu Long reached out instinctively, catching her elbow, steadying her as she swayed. First time that night. It wasn't scandal that filled the air, it was an unfamiliar and painfully tender silence. A silence born not of shock, but of something deeper. Something changing. As the lights dimmed and the security team rushed to surround them, the audience realized they had just witnessed a event that would reshape everything: careers, reputations, the future of two intertwined lives. Fate of a child now thrust into the center of an unforeseen storm. But for Yang Mei Mei and Yu Long, this was only the beginning, and the world would be watching every step they took from here. The aftermath of that explosive night. The world continued to tremble with questions, theories, and whispers of what would come next. Yet beneath the noise, one truth remained unshakable: Yang Mei Mei's courage had changed everything. Her trembling confession had broken open a story that could no longer be hidden, forcing both her and Yu Long to confront the past they once buried and the future that now demanded to be acknowledged. They stepped out of the venue side by side, surrounded by flashing cameras, shaken fans, and an uncertain horizon. The air felt charged with something new. Not scandal, not fear, but possibility. Their next chapter becomes a redemption, a downfall, or a rebirth is a tale only time will reveal. But one thing is certain: the moment she whispered, carrying Yu Long's child, for the second time, the world witnessed a shift too powerful to forget. The story has not ended, it has only taken its first breath. And to you, our readers, thank you for staying with us until the final moment of this unraveling truth. Your attention, your curiosity, presents make every story worth telling. Until the next chapter unfolds, stay watchful, stay curious, and stay with us as we continue uncovering the hidden heartbeat beneath every headline. Thank you for reading.